Best time to drop a record. Best time. Well, I mean, there's kind of different times for different things and different reasons why one time might be better than another. But so obviously, like December, don't do it. January is tough because like all the conferences are happening then, and coming back after the holidays can be tough. So like you need, 6 8 weeks of lead time minimum when you're dropping a record. More like 3 months lead time. So like if you want to send it out in the beginning of January, you're kind of looking at late February, early March. So generally, like anything that's in the March timeframe is easier to work because if you're releasing in January, you're trying to submit everything in November, December, and it just gets hairy. People are busy. People are thinking about year-end lists and all these kinds of things. So kind of like March is kind of a sweet spot, and then because once you get into April and May, April is okay as well. But once you get to May, June, that tends to be the time when all the big artists, bigger name artists, maybe you are a big name artist, but like you're competing with everyone on Mac Avenue and everyone on Blue Note that's putting out records for the summer touring season in May and in June. So that can be a little tough. And then I've had good success with records that come out in February, March, July, and August because July there are a little bit of like lulls. So there's a little bit more time for people to check out music, meaning the industry people to check out music and to check out, especially if you're a new artist or up and coming artist, emerging artist, whatever you want to call it. You get into the fall, and then you run into the Grammy deadlines with September and October, so that can be a little tricky, depending on which categories you want to submit to the Grammys for, who you want to be competing against, whether you want to be in next year's Grammys or this year's Grammys. So there's some considerations there. But the fall touring season is kicking off then as well, so a lot of the people put it out September because they want the fall touring stuff and the Grammy nomination stuff, which happens in the fall. The submissions and everything happen in the fall, so September can be a little crazy. And then October is like your last chance to get something out before November, December. This year especially, it became extremely obvious to me that we haven't been releasing holiday music soon enough. I've always said that it should be right after Thanksgiving, but now it's got to be beginning of November. You've got to be getting holiday music out. So if you're thinking about doing some kind of holiday project, somebody, it's got to get at least submitted, sent out, and if it comes out after that, that's okay. But man, it's definitely got to be sooner because if you want to get into all the various different places, you got to get that stuff moving sooner rather than later. So that kind of breaks down the whole year. Hope that's helpful, Rob. I don't know if it is, but man, if you're gonna drop a record, hit me up. We should do something. How important do you think jazz scale / chord scale theory actually is? It's just a jumping off point, really. I mean, you have to understand the sounds and how the sounds function more than like some kind of complex scale theory. And it's more important to learn language than it is to learn scales. That being said, language is made up of scales and arpeggios and all those things. Scales and arpeggios. And so we do like a scale workout that helps you get totally familiar with all the major modes, major sounds, melodic minor sounds, minor modes. So in the fall we do a scale workout, in the spring we do a mode workout, so that you are totally comfortable improvising, within these key centers, these sounds, But chord scale theory, I mean, I think it's important to know theory, especially if you want to write music, you want to understand it on a high level. Because I think there's always multiple answers. Like there's no like, oh, play this on this. You can play whatever it is that somebody's telling you to play, but there's multiple options. And to know the options and know different ways of thinking about it is important to me. So that's why I kind of get into scale theory. But I don't really know if what I do is really what like the Jamie Aebersold chord theory, in in the improv class I teach, like we talk about language. We learn language. We don't talk about scales. We learn language. A lot of it is like the Barry Harris kind of approach. I transcribed a lot of stuff for Barry Harris and exercises and applying his concepts to tunes. And it's just playing. It's playing language over tunes and getting that into your internalized into the back of your mind, so you don't have to think about it. So that's that. And then the way that I think about scales is there's two types of scales. There's diatonic scales and symmetrical scales. there are symmetrical scales that work on different chords. There are diatonic scales that work on different chords that get you different sounds. But to me, it's more about the sound than it is about the chord or about the scale. But the reason that you got to know all of them is because I think it's important to be able to spell any chord or talk about any chord or any sound in three ways. So the three ways are as a regular chord, like C7 sharp 9 is regular, like written out chord symbol. And then you want to think about, okay, well, how could I represent that as a slash chord? So that would be like E flat over C7. Would be like an E flat triad will get you that sharp 9 over C7. And then the third way is to think of a mode. So like what mode has an E natural and an E flat in it, or what scale, you know? So I would say like, oh, you probably want to play like a C altered scale to get that sound. Probably the sharp 9 sound. It's also in the diminished, but it depends how you treat it. It's the 6th scale degree is the difference between the diminished and the altered. So did I lose you? Talking about the theory of it. I mean, it's all so close, but so the way that I think about it is talking about learning the symmetrical scales, which is chromatic, whole tone, diminished, augmented. Those are symmetrical scales. Then you have the diatonic scales, or the parent scales, which is the major scale, the melodic minor scale, the harmonic minor scale, and the harmonic major scale, and I go in that order. And most of the time with students, we only get through the first two. And most students I work with for 2 years, you know, especially here at UNT, we do 4 semesters of lessons, so we talk about major scales, major modes, melodic minor modes, melodic minor scale, melodic minor modes. So then from there, you've got another half of stuff to check out. But I mean, I have to think about like all 7 modes are part of that sound. So when you're talking about melodic minor, yes, it's a melodic minor scale, but there's 6 other sounds within that. And so just trying to focus and go deep, that's something that I really try to do is like, let's go deep on one thing at a time, rather than just kind of brushing the surface of like, here's 28 modes that you should know. It's like, well, no, you're not going to actually learn any of them. You have to actually spend time with them and improvise with them. So that's what we do. So we do 1 key per week. Well, actually in the spring we do 1 root note per week, and we focus on all the modes of that sound. So like we'll do C. So C major, if you're doing a C major workout. So you do C major, C Dorian, C Phrygian, C Lydian, C Mixolydian, C Aeolian, which is the same as natural minor, and then C Locrian. So when we actually improvise with those sounds, compose something with those sounds, do something like, how do you use it? What chords does it go on? So, you know, and especially when we get into talking about tunes with modal mixture, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, all these kind of things, like we talk about modal mixture and how these chord symbols can be like sometimes like you're thinking something modally and it has to be spelled as a chord symbol, and then once you get like twice removed from the composer, now somebody's thinking of a mode to put on a chord symbol that came from a mode. So you get disconnected from the actual sound. You know what I'm saying? Like Wayne Shorter tunes all the time. A great example is This Is for Albert on the bridge. That chord is D major, is G major 7 sharp 11 over C sharp. But it's really a different, it's not that complicated of a chord. It looks complicated on the lead sheet, but it's just a Locrian mode, D major. So it's very interesting when you can go back and forth. But if you don't have the theory, there's no way you would figure that out. You know, if someone doesn't be like, look, it's just a major scale. You know, that's why I think it's important to know theory. So it's not really chord scale. It's just like music theory. It's knowing the modes of the 4 parent scales and the symmetrical scales. But I don't think about scales. You know, I think about sounds. And there's 7 sounds within each diatonic scale. Do you have any tips for mastering 26/2 melody? I don't know. That one's a hard one. You got to play that for a long time. You got to use alternate positions as well. As many alternate positions as you can. You got to go slow. Really, really slow. Just like the sign says. Go slow. Go really, really slow. It's the same as anything else. But, and then the changes, man, talking about train changes, learning train changes, working on train changes, I think it's really important if you actually learn it from this side first. A lot of people go to giant steps first. The way that I learned train changes was I went to Satellite, this tune, and then to 26/2, and then to Countdown, and then came backwards around the long way to giant steps. Because giant steps is like the answer key. like it's the matrix. Whereas all of those tunes I just mentioned, those 4 tunes, are all practical applications of that substitution. So it's, for me, more musical to approach it from satellite, to approach it from 26.2, to approach it from that side of things. So I go there first, and then back around to giant steps. But in terms of thinking about the changes, Steve Davis kind of showed me this a long time ago. And so if you're thinking about the changes, you can alternate 1, 2, 3, 5 down and whole steps through those changes. So like the first couple of bars is like F major, then A flat 7, and then D flat major, right? So you would go F major, E flat minor, D flat major, and then E goes to E7, right? And so you play B minor, so you can play alternating major, minor, major, minor, down in whole steps. And that's how you can create really flowing lines that are melodic over those changes that are hard. So at any rate, I love 26.2. It's a great tune. I think you can play pretty musically on it. There's an arrangement that I did for my sextet that I can't wait. I got to get it back going again. That has like a pedal section and a bunch of other things. So now I got to go and do it. What's an optimal amount of time to spend on an unfamiliar mode, assuming someone isn't constrained by a school year schedule? Until you know it. That's the optimal amount of time. Don't move on until you know it, especially if you're not constricted by a schedule. Don't move on from anything until you know it, especially if you're not on a schedule. But Mike, I will caveat by saying that, like, yes, you need to like practice it until you move on, but also like to me it's like about consistently working on it over time. Thinking I'm going to get it totally in one day is not really what I mean. It's like, all right, this month I'm going to work on this mode. So then I would do as many things as I could, especially if it was an unfamiliar mode. A great one is like second mode of melodic minor. Goes with sus flat 9, and you can take that and you can think about different ways of arpeggiating it, writing a tune with it. How do I incorporate this sound? What does it look like in a slash chord? How do I utilize it? How do I hear it? And so I would just find different ways to do it. There's certain modes that I don't ever play. Phrygian is really hard for me, even just a basic Phrygian mode. Like I don't necessarily hear it. I hear like a double harmonic scale when I hear Phrygian, which is like another one of those symmetrical scales, but double harmonic is like the top part of a harmonic major or harmonic minor, but in a row, a tritone apart. Sorry, not a tritone apart, but it'd be like C, D flat, E, F, G, A flat, B natural, C. That'd be a double harmonic. So yeah, you got to just take as long as it takes. Greetings, Nick. I've been playing 40 plus years, but I play by ear. What's the best way for me to learn to read charts? Get together and play duets with people, play etudes, play stuff where you've got the music and that you know the song already, like something you know already. Get the chart and start to match up what you're seeing with what you're hearing. Because that even happens to me after reading for plenty of time, is that if it looks and sounds different or it doesn't line up, I get confused. So trying to do that. Something that really has helped my sight reading is rhythmic dictation. They do that in like an oral skills class in college. It's basically just where you listen to a transcription or anything and just write down the rhythm. Don't even worry about the notes, but write down the rhythm. That's the hardest part for most people. We can figure out what the pitches are, but they disregard the rhythm. So if you get rid of the pitches and only do the rhythm, what's the rhythm of this? What's the rhythm of this? What's the rhythm of this? Then you can kind of start to recognize the rhythms when you're playing. So, bass clef, you got to learn the clefs, and then you got to just read music that you know, so you can kind of match it up, and then just sight read all the time, every day. And you need to sight read in a way where you can check that you're doing it correctly. So that means like with a recording, with somebody that knows what they're doing, playing duets, any of that stuff. Did you hear Wyclif's Mouthpiece buzzing solo? Has that changed your opinion of Mouthpiece buzzing? Yes, I did see that. I watched that concert. This was on Emmett Cohen's channel. Did you hear? And I did see it. It doesn't change my opinion of Mouthpiece buzzing, though. I mean, Mouthpiece buzzing is really good for some people and really bad for other people. And you don't really buzz a mouthpiece when you're playing. I still will say that I believe that. Although there has been times in my development where I did do mouthpiece buzzing, but there's also other times when, yeah, I definitely don't mouthpiece buzz, and it's definitely something that I don't do on a regular basis. I think that does more harm than good for some people, and it creates tension sometimes trying to buzz, because when you need to focus on the flow of the air, but when you're focusing on the buzz, you start thinking about corners and chops, and like it just, to me, isn't effective. But obviously Wycliffe is a natural, and he's like, everybody has to figure out how to do it for themselves. So I'm not saying that I'm correct. I'm just saying that for me, the mouthpiece buzzing sometimes makes my sound worse. So I don't always recommend it. What was the harshest thing a teacher said to you in a lesson? It wasn't in a lesson. It was in a master class. And he just said, you think you know what you're doing? You're sad. I'm not going to say who it was, because you all know it's not who you think it is probably, but everyone would know who it was. When you were a student, did teachers ever assign you to write your own lead sheets and not rely on real book changes to a tune? Yes, all the time. I am doing the same with my students. The real book is not correct most of the time. It's not correct to the version that you're playing, and being able to make a decision about what you want to play on a tune, like what you hear when you listen to the original, what you think it's supposed to be, what you enjoy, what alternate changes you like, that's the lead sheet you should make. So yeah, I have from Juilliard, I have all the lead sheets I made for all the tunes that we did for juries and for other things. So yes, and I understand that it seems like it's a waste of time, but it's not, because you are internalizing that, you're deciding what the changes are. If you just go through and copy and paste it, like that's just an exercise in being lazy. But like, you want to say, okay, well, I want to do it this way. This is the way I want to do it. Make any fixes. Put the melody how you like to see it. Put it in the octave you want to see it. Put it in the clef you want to see it. Lay it out in the way that you think is most clear for the rhythm section to read it. Do you want to add hits? Do you want to add an intro? Do you want to add an outro? Do you want to do the intro from this recording and the outro from that recording? That's why you do this. Like just this morning, somebody played Joy Spring, and they thought that the rhythm section would know the intro. They didn't know the intro. They sort of knew the intro, but they didn't really know it. So what could have been a better thing to do? Write it out, right? Make your own lead sheet. Because if you want to play always want to play the intro to Joy Spring, now you have a lead sheet that has the correct one. I have a lead sheet of Eternal Triangle for the same reason. That's one of the tunes that we're doing for juries this week with the intro. That's my lead sheet. Did anybody use it? No, but that's okay. But I'm just saying that's why you would make your own lead sheets. So that's the way that you want to do it, or the way that your teacher wants you to do it. And then you have your own library, and you don't got to worry about sharing those, because you're not violating any publishing laws. Brian, how long do you think it takes to learn a tune? Well, it depends on the tune, and it depends where you are on your journey. I could learn a tune in an hour, but that doesn't mean I'm going to remember it in a year. I think it takes a long time to internalize a tune. It takes not very long to memorize and be able to regurgitate a tune for a gig. Those are different skills, and that they have different applications, right? So sometimes you need to be able to learn something really fast and just do it, and then sometimes you need to be able to internalize the tune. So like I would say for different tunes, for me, it's taken a different amount of time. September in the Rain, when I learned that, I could learn it. I learned it in about 2 seconds, right? It's not that hard. I learned the melody, and as soon as I started playing piano, I can just, if I can sing the melody, then I can figure out what the changes are by ear, basically, right? And then remember a couple little details, and then boom, bang, got it, done. But then if you're thinking more about like internalizing, like Moment's Notice took me, I don't know, probably on and off playing that tune for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years before I felt like I learned it, internalized it, could call it on a jam session. So it really depends. It depends what it is, and depends on how deep you feel like you need to be in order to feel like you know a tune, So at the beginning, it takes a long time. The further along you are in the journey, the faster it goes, because you recognize patterns. So I look at a tune and I just say, oh, it's 1, and then it goes to 4, minor on the bridge. It does this little special thing, and then it goes back and does the last day, and I'll just remember that, right? But that's after years of developing pattern recognition, years of developing a sense of how tunes work. There's a great, if you're interested in it, there's a great theory book by Darius Tarafenko, one of my professors from Eastman, and he breaks down, I think it's 18 or 20, maybe it's 18 or 22, 24, like models of tunes, and it basically fits almost every single tune in the jazz canon into these models, where like harmonic models, and they're all just various decorations on these harmonic models. Do I know all the models? No, but I'm just like saying that the tunes are generally similar enough that you can pretty much memorize a couple of patterns, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 in every key, and you've got most of it. Go to the 4, go to the 2, go to 3 major, go to 2 dominant, go to the 4 chord, go to minor 5, go to a 6. Like there's only so many places that most tunes go. 3 major. Been looking into how musicians practice in chunks, in small increments of time. Let's say you have 30 minutes and you were to have a list of things to work on. What would you do in order? I don't think there's one answer to that question. It really depends on the context. I kept a practice journal for a long time at Juilliard, and I believe in it so much. I mean, I even made my own. I don't know where it is, but I've like printed copies of my own and was selling them. I don't have one in here, but you have to figure out how you work best. You work best. So, like, how long can you practice for effectively? It's not the same for me as it is for you. So to say it's 30 minutes is not necessarily the case for you, is for me, whatever. So I found 90 minutes was my sweet spot. Any more was, I started to get distracted. Any less, and I was thinking, I was rushing, right? So obviously that's not always the case, but if I have 30 minutes, if we're just talking about 30 minutes, I have nothing, I'm working on trombone fundamentals. Because if I can't play my trombone, my instrument, I can't do anything, right? So I focus on 3 areas: sound, flexibility, and articulation. So flexibility means, to me, being able to do what I need to do when I need to do it. So that could encompass a lot of different areas, but if maybe it's 10 minutes on each, maybe it's 5 minutes on each and playing through some music. If I only have 30 minutes, if I have a list of things to do, I'm not going to probably even start on a list like that in 30 minutes. The 30 minutes to me is like, that's like, I need to shed this, and if I have one thing, then I'll work on that one thing. Like I'll learn this tune, do this transcription, whatever that is, like one thing. I don't want to, if I can only do so much, so if it's 30 minutes, that's what I'm going to do. If it's 30 minutes in a day, trombone fundamentals for 15, work on a tune for 15. If that's all I got, then that's all I got. When I was at my practicing prime, it was 3 or 4 90-minute sessions a day that were broken up into fundamentals, trombone stuff, trombone. So that's like one, and then doing a classical session, and then doing like a vocabulary and transcription session, and then an improvisation section. So that would be like 4 90-minute sessions. So that's like 6 hours. But that was like when I took time off between undergrad and grad school. That's what I would do. That's what I was doing. And then in grad school, I tried to keep that up, probably more like 3 or 4 hours instead of 6, but and I lost track. But I used to lock myself in the practice rooms at Eastman, and I make my girlfriend come and sit in the room. She would just very patiently sit there while I practice and work on whatever she was working on. When you were working on your first record, what do I remember being the most challenging part of this process? Actually, getting the recording done was the most challenging part of the process. I had decided that the record was going to be like a introducing kind of record, and be like a variety of tunes and just show a variety of things, but it was going to be focused on original music. So I kind of decided that from the beginning, so I didn't have to think about that too much. But the process was the thing that was the hardest to learn and was the most difficult. Meaning, like, what happens? Okay, we got it in the can. We have 20 takes of 8 different tunes. What do I do now? That was the part that was the hardest. I got taken advantage of by the publicist I hired. I spent a lot of money, wasted a lot of money. But there was a few people that I got in touch with through that first record that really changed some things, That's what it takes. You got to do those first couple things, the first couple records, to get in touch with the right people. And then like one thing snowballs after the next. And you just meet different people. I'm talking about industry people that can help move the projects along. And it just takes time. It takes repetition. People introducing you to other people will be like, no, don't work with that person. blah, 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 blah. They tell you why. Or you have firsthand experience about why you don't want to work with them, or, you know, you want to try out different things. You want to try out different labels. You want to try out using a producer, not using a producer. The first record, I didn't have a producer. Now I'll never do another record without a producer. It's so much better to have a producer. And that's why I love producing for other people. Because, like, if you trust me, then it's cool. Like, I can tell you what's good and what's not. But there just has to be a mutual respect. So I always have Ryan Truesdell, who also does Maria Schneider, produces for her, and played in his band, the Gil Evans Project. But he's got great ears, great suggestions, and I trust him, and that he's not going to BS me, you know, in the studio. What is one underrated record that most of your friends, that my friends don't know about? My friends are pretty well listened. An underrated record I think that people don't know about is JJ and Voices. That's one. Oh, you know what? Actually, there's this record. It's called Love Songs. It's Cannonball with, it's not Cannonball with strings. It's Cannonball and Nat with a string orchestra. And it's called The Greatest Love Songs, or just Love Songs. I forget. They play Stella on there. They play Black Orpheus. They play a bunch of stuff. It's killing. And that's something I want to do. I want to make a record like that someday. And I've been talking to Ryan about it too. Like orchestra with like great arrangements and like some blowing, but really like just melodies and like nice presentations. There is a debate on what being a musician can accomplish with saying yes to all types of gigs and performance opportunities, regardless of pay and experience. Do you believe that regardless of what happens, should you continue to say yes to all opportunities? Well, I mean, obviously, I think that has an end. You know, you have to decide where your limit is for yourself. But in general, I think for the first 12 years of your post-high school life, you should say yes to everything. There's no reason to delineate 30 as a marker, but I'm just saying from 18 to 30, you should say yes to every single thing, because you don't know where it's going to take you. And you don't know what connections you're going to make. Obviously, say no to things that suck. You know, I'm not saying that. But I am more loose with that rule than other people in terms of saying like, oh, it's got to pay this much, or they should pay us this, or whatever. I never said that. I just said yes. I would do everything. I got on some crappy gigs, you know. I did some stuff I don't want to ever do again. But I do think you should say yes to everything, but up to the limit of yourself, you know where your limits are, know how much you can travel, know how much you need to sleep, know how much time you need for yourself. You know, for me, I was able to just throw myself in 100%, and I just have that kind of like go kind of thing, and don't worry too much about myself. That has to change at some point too, you know, like, so you can't do it forever. You definitely can't do it forever. But you have to know what you don't like, you know, and you have to experience those things, and you have to make those decisions for yourself. But somebody just reposted Nicholas Payton's thing, Why Jazz is Dead, again, and he says a lot of things that make a lot of sense, man. Says some stuff about like glorifying being a starving artist, and I've been on that tip for years, saying like, no, you don't have to be. You don't to be a successful musician. You can be smart. You can make money. It's okay. You can do what you want to do and live the life you want to live. You don't. You're not bound by the rules of what someone told you as a myth. You know. Any specific advice for auditioning at schools like Juilliard? I'll tell you what I did. I don't know if it was good advice or bad advice. I took a whole year off after my undergrad to prepare for that audition. I wanted to get in. I wanted to make it happen. So I took a whole year off. I dedicated everything to that one goal. Shed like crazy. Got lessons with people. Got to know what they were looking for. And just like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get into this place. And I knew I was going to move to New York anyway. So my plan was I auditioned at Juilliard. MSM is the backup. And then if I didn't get into either one, I was moving to New York anyway. So I knew that that's what I was doing, and I had decided many years before that that's what I was doing. So I was just like, this is what's happening. There's no question here. But the specific advice is that you can only be as prepared as you're going to be. You're going to present yourself how you're going to present yourself on that day, and then just it is what it is. I thought I did terribly, and I've told this story before, but I walked from 66 back to 96, which was like a mile and a half or something, in the rain, pissed because I thought I sucked. And I got in anyway, and then I got in. And it was great. It was good. So we're always harder on ourselves than what it is in reality. And in an audition like that, something to keep in mind is that they're going to push you till you fail. Or at least they did. And that's what it was. And so you should expect to be pushed to failure, and that's what they want to see is like how good your ears are. How do you deal with this tempo or that tempo or this situation or that situation? Be prepared for anything, and just know that they're going to push you until you fail, and they want to see you fail. Like they want to hear you sound great, but they also want to hear you, where your limits are. Is it a good fit as a school? Can we teach you? Is there room for you to improve? All those things. Who are your top five-ish trombone professors working today? Well, I think trombone professors. I'll just have to probably go longer than that, longer than five. But it depends what you need, and I think you know that. But I think Steve Davis is obviously great. I think James Burton is great. He's teaching at Berkeley right now. Steve Davis will be teaching at Berkeley next year. I think they're great. Michael Deese is a great teacher for teaching a lot of language and getting your stuff together. So he's great too. I love, there's some teachers that are just like really great trombone pedagogues, like Mark Kellogg at Eastman is going to like make you get better. Even if it's not always talking about like jazz all the time, there's like always this kind of battle between like teachers students' perception that like if they go study with a teacher, that they need to be a jazz player or not a jazz player, or like there's a lot of rub there, I guess. I don't know how to describe it really, but Jim Pugh is a really great teacher, and he's in Illinois, a trombone teacher. And then like maybe out in LA, there's Alex Isles. I don't know where he teaches, but he's like just a great freelancer, great, like very organized way of approaching the trombone. And there's a lot of people that are great teachers that aren't necessarily professors, I guess they teach at places, but they might not be professors, like Ryan Keberly, like Marshall Jilks, saying the wrong names. And I don't know too much about his teaching, but I know he has great players come out of his studio. Is Dante Luciani down in Miami for trombone fundamentals and stuff. Like there's so many great teachers around. But specifically for jazz, I mean, there's Paul McKee. He's out in Boulder. I mean, John Fedchuk is a good teacher, but he doesn't teach anywhere at the moment, like full time. He's been teaching, I think, in Montclair, or he was at Purchase. I'm judging high school all region tonight in the classical auditions. Any advice? Bring coffee. Make sure you know. The hardest thing for me is establishing a baseline. I often establish the baseline too high when I'm assessing something. Like I assess it based on what is good in general rather than what is good for a high school student, or what's my expectation, like not lowering it, but like making it reasonable to the level of who you're hearing. So sometimes it takes like 3, 4, 5 people before you know kind of like what it is. Try to have patience. Try to breathe. You're going to hear the same thing over and over and over again. But it's a good experience for you. That's good. I'm glad to hear you're doing that. At least they have someone that's musical that's judging it. So, that's what I look for too, is like, I don't know how it works in Texas, like with the judging stuff, but like at the high school level, but I look for musicians, like do they like, oh, he missed a note, but like he plays really musically, like that to me is more important. Like he's developing those instincts. He's playing nice, play pretty. He plays pretty. She plays pretty, like, I don't know. To me, that's important. So I try to balance the like technical with the musical. And that's hard for me too, because sometimes I go too far away from the technical and only focus on the musical. Which musician outside of jazz has been the most influential towards you? Also, what started your music journey? My music journey started in 4th grade band class and being encouraged. Well, I guess it started before that because I was singing and stuff like that. My parents kind of pushed. I kind of did it on my own, so they kind of encouraged that. What musician outside of jazz? I would say it's probably a classical musician. Leonard Bernstein, maybe. What was the last record that inspired you? The last thing that inspired me, Jack Teagarden at the Round Table. There you go. Two Bones is Curtis Fuller and Slide Hampton, because they both passed away recently. And there's a tune called Slides Ride, and they playing rhythm changes. And I was like, man, these guys playing rhythm changes, killing. All right, I got to get going. But thanks for all the questions. Lots of great questions this week. We'll be back next week. Yeah, we'll be back next week, and we'll take some more questions. So have a great week. Hope everyone's doing super well, and we'll catch you soon.